What happens when late-night charm collides with royal defiance? Under the blazing studio lights of Fox's New York set, what begins as polite laughter quickly spirals into tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Tonight, Greg Gutfeld welcomes Meghan Markle to his show. At first, it looks like another celebrity interview. But within minutes, Meghan's sharp, dismissive replies and Greg's relentless probing push the conversation into dangerous territory. By the time the audience realizes what's happening, it's no longer an interview. It's a showdown. The night opened like any other Gutfeld broadcast. A lively audience, a cheeky monologue, and Greg leaning casually against his desk with that trademark smirk. But there was an extra layer of anticipation humming through the crowd tonight. The producers knew it, the cameramen knew it. Even the studio band played with a tighter edge. Because tonight's guest wasn't just another Hollywood actor or political talking head. Tonight's guest was Meghan Markle. The applause hit as she walked onto the stage. Meghan wore a deep navy blazer over a silk blouse, her posture straight, her stride deliberate. To the casual eye, she was poised and gracious, waving briefly before settling into the guest chair. But for those watching closely, there was a flicker, an almost imperceptible tightness around her smile, as if every step into this studio was a calculated choice. Greg welcomed her warmly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, stretching the words, "please give it up for someone who knows a thing or two about making headlines. Meghan Markle." Polite applause. A few cheers. Meghan nodded, her lips forming that polished, diplomatic smile she had perfected over years in front of cameras. "Meghan, thanks for being here," Greg began, voice soft, casual. "I've got to admit, it takes guts to sit down with me. I haven't exactly been your biggest cheerleader, have I?" A ripple of laughter rolled through the studio. Meghan tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Greg," she said smoothly, "I think it's important to have conversations, even with people who might not agree with me. That's how we grow, isn't it?" The audience applauded. Greg leaned back, pen tapping against his desk. He let the silence stretch a beat too long, then asked, "Speaking of growth, you've certainly grown your brand since stepping away from royal duties. From Duchess to producer to podcaster, you've made quite the business out of, well, your last name. How's that going?" A visible shift. Meghan's shoulders tightened, the smile thinning. "I don't see it as making a business out of anything," she replied, her tone clipped. "Harry and I have worked incredibly hard to build meaningful projects that give back. Reducing that to just branding is, well, reductive." Greg's smirk widened. "Meaningful. Right. Like that $100 million Netflix deal, the Spotify podcast, the docuseries shot from your Montecito mansion. Very meaningful." A hush fell over the room. The laughter this time was uneasy, scattered. Meghan's eyes hardened. "You're making it sound like using our platform for good is somehow shameful," she shot back. "We've shared our experiences to help others who might be struggling. That's not profit, it's purpose." Greg leaned in. "Your truth, right? Because that's the phrase you always use. My truth. Funny thing about truth, it doesn't usually need a pronoun. It's just truth. But when it's your truth, Meghan, isn't it really just your version?" The tension sharpened. Meghan's fingers pressed into the armrest of her chair. "Are you questioning my honesty?" she asked, her voice dropping cold. "I'm questioning the concept," Greg replied smoothly. "Take the Oprah interview. You talked about conversations regarding your son's skin color. That was your truth. Other royals had their truth. Which one are we supposed to believe?" The audience inhaled collectively. Meghan's media-trained composure faltered, just slightly. "You know what the problem is," she snapped. "People like you turn painful, personal experiences into cheap sound bites. You're not interested in understanding. You're interested in ratings." Greg chuckled, waving a hand. "Come on, Meghan. I'm asking what millions of people at home are thinking. You've built an empire out of victimhood. And sure, you've done well with it. But that's not truth. That's strategy." Gasps from the audience. Meghan sat straighter, her eyes flashing. "Victimhood?" Her voice was sharp now. "Greg, I endured relentless racist coverage. I received death threats. I was cut off from support, when I needed it most. That's not playing victim. That's surviving. Then why not just leave quietly? Greg countered. Why the tell-all interviews, the documentaries, the books? Why the need to remind the world again and again how badly you were treated? Meghan's breath quickened. Her polished exterior was cracking. Because silence protects the abuser, not the abused, she retorted. I refuse to be silent about what happened. The studio was electric. Even the camera crew leaned in. Greg tapped his desk, eyes gleaming. And there it is, folks, the real Meghan Markle. Not the polished humanitarian, not the smiling duchess, but someone who sees oppression everywhere but in her own privilege. Meghan's jaw tightened. She pushed her chair back, half rising. You want to talk about privilege? Sitting here mocking my pain, profiting off cruelty? That's privilege, Greg. The crowd erupted, half gasps, half applause. The first round had been fired, and the battle was just beginning. The studio felt like it was shrinking. Every camera, every light, every pair of eyes was locked on the two figures across the desk. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the table, his pen tapping with deliberate rhythm, like a metronome keeping time for a duel. Meghan had shifted fully in her chair, her arms crossed now, no longer hiding her irritation. Greg's smirk widened. So Meghan, let's talk about the elephant in the room. America, you've built this whole new life here. How's it treating you? Or, let me put it another way, does it feel good to live in a country that actually wanted you, unlike Britain? The audience chuckled nervously. Meghan's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Excuse me? She said, her voice cool but edged with steel. You heard me, Greg replied. You weren't exactly embraced in the UK, but here, you've got your mansions, your deals, your platform. Must feel like quite the upgrade. Meghan leaned forward, her tone sharp. Is that supposed to be a joke, Greg? Or just another cheap dig at the fact that I didn't fit into an institution built on centuries of exclusion? Because if you're implying I wasn't wanted, maybe you should take a hard look at why that is. Greg raised his eyebrows innocently. I'm just saying, maybe it wasn't all about exclusion. Maybe it was about you. Ever think about that? The audience let out a low gasp. Meghan's hands clenched against the armrest. Oh, so now it's my fault? She shot back. My fault that I was lied about, hounded, and smeared in the press daily? My fault that my mental health collapsed because no one cared enough to help me? That's what you're going with? Greg chuckled, leaning back. Hey, I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what the media is supposed to do? No, Meghan snapped. What you're doing is not asking questions. It's gaslighting. You're twisting my reality so your audience can laugh. That's not journalism. That's bullying. The audience murmured again, split between shock and scattered applause. Greg tapped his pen against the desk, unfazed. All right, let's move on, he said, though his tone suggested he was just getting started. How about your relationship with Harry? Because rumors are flying. He's been spotted back in the UK. You're here. People are whispering. Is there trouble in paradise? The studio fell into silence, everyone waiting for Meghan's response. Her eyes flashed. Are you serious right now? She demanded. You're recycling tabloid trash? That's your angle? Greg shrugged. Hey, I'm giving you a chance to clear it up. Transparency, right? Meghan leaned forward, her voice rising. My marriage is fine. More than fine. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because you'd rather peddle gossip than respect the reality. You think you're clever, Greg, but all you're doing is proving why media can't be trusted. Greg tilted his head, feigning sympathy. Oh, come on, Meghan. You can't have it both ways. You can't sell a docuseries about your love story and then act outraged when people question it. You put your relationship out there. That's the trade. You know what the trade is? Meghan shot back, her voice sharp and cutting. The trade is me trying to use my platform to show people that love, resilience, and truth matter. And people like you twisting it into cheap headlines for laughs. That's the trade. The air in the room thickened with the weight of the clash. Greg didn't flinch. Okay then, let's get real. The royals. Do you even care anymore? Or is the family just a convenient villain for your Hollywood reinvention? The question landed like a grenade. Meghan's lips curled into a bitter smile. Do I care? No, Greg, I don't. Not anymore. I've moved on with my life, and maybe the rest of the world should too. But of course, that wouldn't give you your headlines, would it? Greg leaned forward, seizing the moment. So, no regrets then? Burning bridges, spilling secrets, selling stories, that was all worth it? Meghan's voice hardened. I told my story. I told the truth of what happened. If that makes people uncomfortable, that says more about them than it does about me. Greg's eyes gleamed. He knew he had her cornered. Your truth again. Always your truth. Funny how your truth always happens to make you the hero, huh? The crowd gasped, Meghan's breath hitched, and for the first time she hesitated. But Greg wasn't finished. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so it cut like a blade. And speaking of being the hero, let's talk Netflix. Rumor has it you're negotiating for even more money for the next season of your projects. Care to confirm? Or is that another story we'll hear later, spun as altruism while you cash the check? Meghan's composure cracked. She sat up straighter, her tone icy. Greg, how dare you? My work is about creating meaningful content that uplifts people, not about money. Reducing it to that shows exactly the kind of cynicism you thrive on. Greg smirked, shaking his head slowly. Meaningful content? Meghan, you're selling your personal drama on repeat. That's not uplifting. It's monetized misery. The words hit like a thunderclap. Meghan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crowd sat frozen, the tension unbearable. Greg leaned back, spreading his arms. You know what the real problem is? You're not special. You're not groundbreaking. You're just another celebrity cashing in on their last name and their sob story, and deep down you know it. That's why you keep shouting about your truth. Because without it, without Harry, you're nothing. Meghan's eyes glistened. For a moment, her mask slipped entirely. She blinked rapidly, trying to compose herself, but her breathing gave her away. The silence in the studio was deafening. Greg, sensing the crack, delivered the final blow of the segment. You're not a duchess here, Meghan. You're not in the palace anymore. And this isn't England, where people tiptoe around titles. Here, you're just another guest on my show. And frankly, America doesn't owe you sympathy or applause. The words landed like a sledgehammer. Meghan stared at him, her hands trembling slightly. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. The tears that had threatened all evening finally welled in her eyes. The audience shifted uneasily, the spectacle too raw, too real. Meghan looked away, pressing a hand to her cheek. And for the first time that night, Greg's smirk softened into something else. Not sympathy, but the satisfaction of a man who had just broken through the armor of one of the most media-trained women in the world. The battle wasn't over, but Meghan was already faltering. The studio air was electric, like the charged silence before a thunderstorm. Meghan shifted in her chair, trying to mask the tremor in her hands. Greg leaned back, savoring the moment, twirling his pen like a conductor guiding an orchestra of tension. He broke the silence first. You know, Meghan, I have to admire your persistence. No matter how many contradictions pop up, no matter how many critics line up, you never flinch from playing the same role. Meghan's head snapped up. And what role is that supposed to be, Greg? Greg's smirk deepened. The eternal victim. Always misunderstood, always mistreated, always the brave soul fighting against the big bad system. It's predictable. Boring, even. The audience gasped. Meghan inhaled sharply, her voice quivering with both anger and disbelief. Boring? You think near constant abuse from the press, having my mental health dismissed, my child targeted, is boring? How dare you reduce trauma to something you can mock for laughs? Greg spread his arms as though addressing the crowd. See, this is exactly it. Anytime someone pushes back, you don't engage. You retreat into outrage. You wield pain like a weapon, but people are waking up, Meghan. They're seeing through it. Meghan leaned forward, her composure cracking further, her words spilling out quickly. You think you can sit there in your suit and tell me how I should process pain, how I should tell my story? You don't know what it feels like to be hunted, to be silenced, to be told you don't belong anywhere. You don't know what it's like to wake up every day wondering what lie will be printed about you next. Greg's tone turned cold. You chose this. You stepped into the spotlight willingly. You married into the most famous family on earth. And when the attention didn't flatter you, you cried foul. That's not oppression. That's buyer's remorse. The audience buzzed, the words hanging heavy in the air. Meghan's lips trembled, her eyes glistening, but her voice rose, fueled by fury. I chose love. I chose a life with the man I love. And what I got in return was betrayal, cruelty, and indifference from the very people who should have protected me. Greg leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, voice dripping with mock sympathy. Love, sure, but it seems to me love has become a pretty convenient shield. Every criticism, deflected. Every question, dodged. Every inconsistency, excused. All because you hide behind the word love like it's a free pass. Meghan shook her head, her voice breaking. You don't get it. You'll never get it. This isn't about excuses. This is about survival. If I hadn't spoken up, I wouldn't be here today. Do you understand that? Greg's smirk returned, sharper than ever. Do you hear yourself? Every time, Meghan, every interview, every platform, you always circle back to the darkest parts of your story. Because you know it sells, and you've convinced yourself that survival equals sainthood. The silence that followed was suffocating. Meghan's chest heaved as she struggled to find her words. The tears she'd fought to contain now brimmed dangerously at the edges of her eyes. The audience could feel it. The balance of power had shifted. Greg pressed harder. Let me ask you something simple. Strip away the titles, the Netflix deals, the interviews. Who are you without Harry's name? Who are you without the royal connection? Would anyone care? The words hit like a dagger. Meghan blinked rapidly, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am more than his wife. I am more than a title. Greg pounced. Prove it, because so far everything about your career, your brand, your fame, every dollar you've earned since stepping away was tied back to that family you claim you have left behind. You can run from the palace, Meghan, but you can't run from the truth. You're cashing in on being a Windsor. And without that, you fade into obscurity. Meghan's composure shattered. Her lips parted, but no rebuttal came. The tears spilled freely now, glistening under the harsh studio lights. The audience sat frozen, torn between pity and disbelief at what they were witnessing. Greg leaned back, victory flashing across his face. You see, this is the problem. When someone finally calls it like it is, the mask slips, and all that's left is silence and tears. No clever comebacks, no polished answers. Just the reality that maybe, just maybe, the critics are right. Meghan wiped her cheek with a trembling hand, her voice trembling. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. You can belittle me all you want, Greg, but you'll never take away the truth of what I've survived. Greg's tone sharpened to a final point. And yet here you are, surviving in designer clothes in million-dollar mansions, telling the world how hard it's been, while millions of ordinary people live through real struggles without the luxury of turning it into a Netflix series. The audience murmured uneasily, some clapping, others shaking their heads. Meghan stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. She pulled at her microphone, her hands shaking too much to detach it cleanly. Her tears were visible now, streaming freely. The producers scrambled behind the scenes, the control room shouting instructions, but the cameras kept rolling. Greg leaned back with a satisfied sigh, his voice carrying across the silent studio. America doesn't bow to royals, Meghan, and this isn't England. Here you earn respect. You don't inherit it. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Meghan froze, staring at him, her face a mixture of rage and devastation. For a heartbeat, it looked as though she might respond, but no sound came. Instead, she turned, eyes wet, and began walking toward the edge of the stage. The audience erupted, some gasping, some shouting encouragement, others stunned into silence. The cameras followed her, every step echoing like a drumbeat toward an inevitable collapse. The breaking point had been reached, and Meghan Markle, the woman who had once captivated the world with her composure, was crumbling in front of millions. The sound of Meghan's heels striking the studio floor was deafening in the tense silence. She moved quickly toward the stage exit, her hand still fumbling with the microphone wire clipped awkwardly to her blazer. Every step seemed heavier than the last, her tears catching the harsh studio lights, turning her face into a portrait of anguish. "Meghan, please," one of the producers called softly from the wings. But it was too late. Greg Gutfeld straightened in his chair, his pen now resting firmly on the desk. He watched her with a cool detachment, the smirk on his face gone, replaced by something sharper: finality. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice filling the silence. "There it is, the Meghan Markle exit. We've seen it before, haven't we? The moment the questions get uncomfortable, the narrative starts to crumble, the tears come out, and then the walk-off." The audience murmured, some gasping, others clapping nervously. Meghan froze mid-stride, her back still turned to him, but her body stiffened. For a moment, it looked like she might whirl around and launch one last tirade on thing, but instead she kept moving, her shoulders trembling as she disappeared off stage. The cameras caught everything, the final glance of a once composed duchess breaking down before millions of viewers. Whoopi Goldberg's calm interventions weren't here. Joy Buhar's sharp wit wasn't here. This wasn't daytime TV with a panel of women trying to mediate. This was Gutfeld's territory, and Meghan had stepped into it without realizing how merciless the ground beneath her would be. Greg leaned forward, his voice slicing through the air. "You see, America doesn't kneel to titles. We don't hand out respect because of bloodlines or fairy tale weddings. Here, you earn it. And when someone comes on this stage pretending to be above scrutiny, pretending that every criticism is cruelty, they learn fast that this isn't Buckingham Palace. This is reality." The audience roared with mixed reactions, cheers from some, gasps from others. A woman in the front row shook her head, mouthing "too far," while a man in the back row clapped thunderously. Behind the curtain, Meghan's sobs echoed faintly, her microphone still live for a few agonizing seconds before a producer managed to switch it off. The sound of her breaking down privately, broadcast publicly, hung over the studio like smoke. Greg adjusted his tie, not out of nerves but with deliberate precision. He wanted the audience to see composure in contrast to her collapse. "She came here to sell a story," he continued, his tone calm but merciless. "But stories only work if people believe them. And when the story doesn't add up, when every answer is arrogance, when every hard question is met with attitude, people stop buying. At some point, you can't hide behind palace walls or Netflix cameras or victimhood speeches. At some point, the truth shows up. And tonight it showed up right here." The crowd erupted again, this time with louder applause, though the unease remained. Some shifted in their seats, unsure if they had just witnessed tough journalism or a public humiliation too cruel for comfort. A camera panned briefly to the empty guest chair Meghan had occupied only minutes earlier. It sat there like a ghost, the silence it left behind heavier than anything she had said. Greg looked straight into the camera, his eyes narrowing. "I didn't push her out. I didn't ask her to leave. She chose to walk away. And that's her pattern, isn't it? Walk away from the family, walk away from the country, walk away from anyone who doesn't nod along. But you can't walk away from reality forever. At some point, you face it, and tonight reality hit hard." The control room cut to a wide shot, showing the audience divided but buzzing with energy. Phones were already out, viewers filming, tweeting, uploading clips that would go viral before the show even ended. Greg placed his pen on the desk with finality. "We'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned." The band's music kicked in, jazzy and upbeat, but it clashed awkwardly with the tension still hanging over the studio. Meghan Markle had entered the stage with polished grace, and she had left it in tears. The world had just witnessed her unraveling in real time, and Greg Gutfeld, never one to miss the final word, had delivered his verdict.